Hey everyone, today we're going to look at solving inequalities. I've written down already equations in inequalities. You'll find by the end of this that solving the two of these isn't that much different. So let's actually just kind of compare and contrast a simple solving equation like x plus 4 is equal to 9. Well, in order to isolate for x, I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides. X is equal to 9, subtract 4, so x is equal to 5. Okay, so that's how we solve that particular equation. Let's compare something quite similar, however, it is an inequality. X plus 4 is greater than or equal to 9. So, how we solve this is exactly the same as how we solved this particular equation. So I'll subtract 4 from both sides. X is greater than or equal to 9 subtract 4 is 5. So here, x is greater than or equal to 5. To compare the two, with an equation you get one solution, you get one answer. With inequalities, you'll notice that, well, what satisfies the inequality of x being greater than or equal to 5? Well, 5 does, 6 does, 7 does, 8 does, 10, 100, 1,000 would satisfy this. So within inequalities, you have many solutions. So you have many solutions. You have more than one. It also makes a lot of sense to kind of go back and check your inequalities. So you get x is greater than or equal to 5. What we want to do is compare that to the original and actually pick a value that would satisfy this and see how it kind of plays out in the original. So a value that is greater than or equal to 5 would be 10. Okay, so if x were 10, we'd have kind of, this is us checking. So 10 plus 4 is greater than or equal to 9. Well, is 14 greater than or equal to 9? The answer is yes, and so this is kind of the thought process of solving inequalities. Okay, so let's take on another example here. Something along the lines of x plus 3 is less than negative 3. Okay, so subtract 3 from both sides. We have x is less than negative 3 subtract 3 is negative 6. So here's the solution to my original inequality. Let's kind of graph that solution. So we can just say, okay, here's a negative 6, negative 5, negative 4. We have to be x is less than negative 6. We're not allowed to be equal, so that's an open circle. And we point the arrow towards the left. So things like negative 7, negative 8 should satisfy that original inequality. Let's take negative 8 for example. Negative 8 plus 3 should be less than negative 3. So this turns out to be negative 5. So negative 5 is indeed less than negative 3, so that makes sense. Okay, let's try a little bit more complex example. Seven x plus 8 is greater than 5x subtract 4. Okay, so I'll start where my mind usually goes for this, which is I'm going to add 4 to both sides. So I have 7x plus 8 plus 4, that's plus 12, is greater than 5x. Next up, I will subtract 7x from both sides. So subtract 7x to leave me with 12 is greater than 5x subtract 7x. Okay, so 12 is greater than negative 2x. Okay, so now we're going to divide by negative 2. And kind of put, well, we'll do this as normal. X, oh, negative 2 there, sorry, is, how will we read that? Kind of mentioned I like to rewrite those. So x is less than negative 6. So that's how this reads. X is less than negative 6. So that's kind of the answer to my inequality. Now, we also would like to check this, because I'll tell you right away that that actually isn't the answer to our inequality. It's related, but it's not actually true. And that'll become very, very evident when we check things. This isn't it. Although you don't need to erase it, there's just one minor change we have to make first to make this work. So I'm hoping that you understand why you have to make that change when we check our answer. So let's actually pick a number where x is less than negative 6. Negative 10 would be a good example for that. So negative 10. So we have 7 multiplied by negative 10 plus 8 has to be greater than 5 multiplied by negative 10 minus 4. So let's kind of expand everything out here. This would be negative 70 plus 8. That's negative 70 plus 8, which has to be greater than negative 50 subtract 4. So here I have negative 62 has to be greater than negative 54. So if you just think, is negative 62 more or less than negative 54? With the negatives, it can be tricky. However, you can always go back to thinking of them as temperature. If it's minus 62 out, that's colder than minus 54. So that's a lower temperature. Negative 62 is lower than negative 54. Negative 62 is less than negative 54. But this says it's greater. So this doesn't actually satisfy our original inequality. Well, what doesn't satisfy? Well, the negative 10. Remember, we pulled that because that's less than negative 6. So numbers that are less than negative 6 don't seem to actually work here. You could find that if we pick negative 12 or negative 20 or negative 7. So what's the problem here? Well, it doesn't work. And so there's one rule when it comes to solving inequalities. And this rule is highlighted right here. We have one rule that makes it different. If you multiply or divide at any stage by a negative number, flip the inequality. This is why our solution here of negative 10 didn't work, because we didn't actually do this one rule, which I'm hoping sticks a little better if you actually see why. So if you multiply, well, where did that happen here? I added 4 to both sides. That's not multiplication or division. I subtracted 7x, still not. But right here, negative 2x divided by negative 2. I'm dividing by a negative 2. So therefore, at this stage, this is what should have happened. I divide by -2, and I have the inequality flipped. So -6 and x. So this inequality here needs to flip the other way because I divided by a negative number. So now this reads, so you know I like to flip these around, x is greater than -6. Well, it's a completely different set of solutions than what we had before. So what's a number that's greater than -6? And often when we're asking, or if we're being asked to pick a number to put in for x, pick the easiest thing that you can. The easiest thing where x is greater than -6 would be 0. So you have 7 multiplied by 0 for original equation plus 8 is greater than 5 multiplied by 0. The reason why 0 is easy, because it's easy to multiply by. So 7 times 0 is 0, so we're left with 8 is greater than -4. That's true. So now when we get to the end, unlike here we get to the end and it didn't make sense. It was an illogical statement. Here we get to the end, because we flip that inequality sign, we get a very logical statement. So that should be everything you need to know when you solve an inequality. If I just sum it up, it's the same as solving an equation, but if you ever multiply or divide by a negative number, just flip the inequality and you should be good.